Hello, everyone. I am so excited because today we're talking about doing those hard things, doing those have tos, doing the must do's of education while we are keeping a love of learning high. I know that seems kind of weird because everything that I talk about stopping the box checking, making sure that we're focused on inspiring lifelong learning. Well, guess what? Box checking kills love of learning. Why do I know that? Because I did it myself when we first started homeschooling. I started by box checking. I got all the curriculum, I got all the little desk and sat my 6-year-old down and we were going into the workbooks and after about 15 minutes he was kind of done and he started to walk away. And I said, "Buddy, wait, we've got more to do." And he said, "Oh, okay." So he sits back down, does about 10 more minutes, and then he's about done. So he gets up and he starts to walk away. And I said, "Wait a minute. Wait a minute. If we don't do math," in the back of my brain, I'm thinking, if we don't do math, we're going to fail at life. Well, he sits back down because I'm like, "Buddy, cheerleading, we got to do some more. We haven't done math. We got to do math." And then, so he sits down, he does a little bit of that. And then he's really, really done. He's done so much to the fact that there's no way I'm getting him to do any more. Now, of course, we're reading books aloud, we're doing things like that, but the actual book work, the workbooks and the textbooks, those were harder. And it came to be where every single day I could get less and less out of him. And every day there was more and more and more frustration. And now we're anticipating the frustration. And so much so that he's crying every day. And now I'm crying every day. And it's a mess. I watch my son's level of love of learning get lower and lower and lower. Frustration increases, stress increases. I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what to do. I realized very quickly after I stopped, reset, got some new information, realized that I was doing exactly what I knew didn't work in school. I was box checking. I was focused on just making sure we did the math, making sure we did the this, and making sure we did the science, right? And throughout that, there's no inspiration for love of learning there. And I know what that looks like because as a high school English teacher before I had my son, I saw that every single day. And box checking really does lower our kids' love of learning. But let's face it, we have to do some of those things, especially for legal state requirements. And if you are in a state where there are some more requirements than others, then you have to do some things. There are lots of states that don't have a lot of requirements, which is fabulous. But if you're in one of those states that does, then there are some boxes that you have to check. Also, there are some boxes that we need to check when we are putting together high school transcripts because we want legit high school transcripts that are honest and that show our kids' journey in learning in the same way that someone could look at a transcript from a public school or whatever and recognize the same things, okay? Just so that they're not questioning at college admissions isn't questioning what's on your transcript, what does that even look like? They're not questioning, do they have all the requirements, does that meet the requirements, that kind of thing. So we want to make it legit, but it doesn't mean that we have to kill love of learning during that time. It doesn't mean that we have to do all the box checking things. We have to do some, but it doesn't have to be all of it. Okay. So I want to share with you today 3 keys to keeping love of learning high when we have to do the have tos, when we have to do the must do's. Now, like I said, if you've been following me up until now, come back to me if you've gotten a little lost because I want to let you know that there are very few have tos typically in homeschooling, okay? There are very few must do's in the way that looks like school, traditional school, whatever. So if you are stuck, if you're not sure what to do, contact me. Okay. If you're not sure how that can look like without lowering level of learning, or if you already have a low level of learning to where you're frustrated, you're crying every day, you guys, please, please, please reach out to me and let's schedule a chat, because it does not have to be that way. We have an amazing experience now. I'm going to share about that in a little bit, but I want you to know that we have to think long term. We have to think long term, because it doesn't have to kill, those have tos don't have to kill love of learning. They can keep love of learning high. But there's three things that you need to have in place in order to be able to do that. Are you guys ready? This is exciting because nobody talks about this. And this is something that's very important if we're trying to raise lifelong learners and leaders. If we're trying to raise that kind of a person, then we have to think about the long-term picture, okay? Even if you have littles right now, this is for you, okay? So listen up. These are the three things that you need to have in place so that when you do the must-dos, when you do the have-tos, the box checking, you don't have to kill love of learning. The first thing, let's talk about the first thing. The first thing is that love of learning already needs to be high for your son or daughter, and it needs to be high for a long time. Okay. I'm not talking about they just got their love of learning back and now we can do all these have tos. No, 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 no. That's a good way to kill love of learning again. We have to have a high level of love of learning for a consistent amount of time so that the brain doesn't go back to, oh, that yucky box checking thing, right? And then we have to reinvent our learning expectations and consistently prove to ourselves that that's what we know is to be true. That's the love of learning being high, that message of high love of learning. That's what needs to be in place for a long period of time in order so when we have to put the box checking in there, it doesn't mess everything up. Okay. Like I said, if you just got the love of learning back in your household, this is not the time to start box checking, because you'll go right back to where you started from: frustration, complaining, overwhelm, and all the things. Okay. So it needs to be high for a long period of time. You cannot do it any other way. If you do it any other way, you will lower love of learning. Okay. These are the three things. Does that make sense? Number one, I hope that makes sense to you. Number two, oh, by the way, which number one, we need to make sure that we think long term about this. We have to start now to make sure that love of learning is high and stays there. That's what I'm all about, you guys, because in order to raise a lifelong learner, we have to get love of learning high as soon as possible. And we have to gain the skills and the thinking to get us there, and the culture, which is number two. Very good segue, right? Into number two. Number two is that your culture needs to support a high level of love of learning and inspiration for learning consistently. Do you like that word, consistently? I know it's a little bit scary because we have our moments where there's up and downs, and we need to know how to identify what the symptoms are of when it's down and what to do to get it back up high again. We have to have the culture in place. If it's not in place, then what happens is when we have to do the have tos, we go back to the box checking. We go back to that mental capacity where, oh, I don't like this. I remember this. This is the stuff I didn't like. And now we have to rebuild love of learning again because it's down. Okay. I know it seems so careful and trepidatious, but trust me, you can do it. You can do it. That's what I'm here for. That's my jam. This is what I'm all about. This is the Raising Leaders Roadmap. This is everything that I teach. But listen, you have to have long-term vision about this. You can't say, well, when we get to high school, we'll deal with that. No, no. You have to create a culture where love of learning is high now, and you have to keep it there for a long term. If you're in high school already, whoo, you don't have very much time. You got to get that high as quick as you can. And we have to have a little bit of a grace period before we start the have-tos. And it comes into our third key to keeping love of learning high during the have-tos, which is that all the have-tos don't have to look like school. They don't have to look like traditional education. It doesn't have to look like the class, the textbook, the workbook, the assignments. It doesn't have to look like that all the time. Okay, so when we're in high school, I was just talking to you guys that have high schoolers. If you're there and when your kids are there, if you start box checking all of a sudden when they've had this journey of a high level of love of learning and everything starts to be box checking, it can start to wane and love of learning can start to drop. What we can do is we can make the box checking look a lot different. It does not have to look traditional. Okay. And that's going to look different for every single person, depending on the child's interest, depending on where they're going. If they're going straight to a 4-year college, if they're going to a JC, if they're going to a trade school, if they're going to be entrepreneurs, whatever the case, it's going to look a little different. That's why we need to chat. Okay. But suffice to say that it doesn't have to look like that right now. So you can create an experience, a high school experience. You could, those state standards and those state requirements, you can put them together in a way where it's not super box checking. Yeah, if you have to do a yearly assessment, there's not much you can do about that. But if you frame it in a way that, hey, this is just something we got to do, just do your best on it. It's just going to give us a little feedback. But you know what? It doesn't really matter because we're learning all the time anyway. This is just another practice way to learn on how to practice taking tests. This is just a little snapshot. Doesn't mean anything about anybody. So most of the time, 99% of the time, you're going to see state requirements that do not require them to make any be a grade level, I should say. Some of them have to make 1 year progress, some don't, and most of them don't actually. Sometimes you just have to take it and say you took it. That's it. So, and you don't even have to turn it in to anybody most of the time. So if you got questions about that, definitely contact me. There are a couple states where you have to put together portfolios and things, and there's New York, oh my gosh, with the lesson planning. But don't worry about it. We just need to chat and we can have it. We can modify it so that it's not super box checking to lower that love of learning. For example, my son in his high school experience right now, he's a sophomore in high school per se, right? I'm going to put quotations around that. You guys know if you're homeschooling that you can put quotations around that. So if you have a high schooler, you can do it in a way that doesn't look like traditional school all the time. And my son has had a high level of love of learning for a very long time. We've had a culture that consistently supports inspiration and love of learning. It wasn't always that way. Obviously, you know how we started. And then there were some times in between where we had to learn a few things. We had to get that love of learning back up. But since it's been high for so long, now I can take some things that are a have to or a must do, and I can say, buddy, this is something that we just have to do. And I can challenge him a little bit in that. And now we can have these conversations. If you did that with a 5-year-old, if you did that with a 7-year-old, even if you did that with an 11, 12-year-old, it's probably not going to work. Okay. I'm just going to be super honest with you about that. Maybe 11, 12-year-old, depending on how the love of learning was throughout, but definitely not the littles. The love of learning has to be consistently high and the culture has to support it. And then what we do is we can take those have tos and we don't make them necessarily look like school, right? We may use some curriculum, we may not use some curriculum. And remember what I think about curriculum, it's learning happens everywhere all the time. So it's not just a book or a textbook or a class or whatever, right? So a lot of that comes into play when we're thinking about how we're going to check these boxes. There are other ways to put together a transcript besides just taking a class, completing a textbook curriculum, completing a workbook. You don't have to do that all the time to get a high level of learning, get what they need, and to suffice a transcript, a legit transcript that can allow them to be successful in college. In fact, oh my gosh, I'm going to say a little something here that's a little bit tricky. It's going to kind of hit some people like, what? But I'm going to say this anyway. The more that it doesn't look like traditional school and love of learning is high, those things have to be together. Oftentimes, more learning happens. They're more prepared. They're more retention happens. There's more retention that happens. You guys, that's so cool. There's so much amazingness that happens when love of learning is high, the culture is high, and it doesn't look like box checking necessarily, but we're still kind of doing the boxes a little. Okay. And sometimes we do have to do a box check. Sometimes it does have to look like school. And that's okay because if love of learning is high, the culture is high, and it's been that way for a long time. Now we can do that, and it's okay. Now we can do it. Okay? Do you hear what I'm saying, you guys? You guys, this is so freeing because we're always afraid of lowering that love of learning. But there are some things that we have to check boxes. Remember, there's not very many. Not very many, especially before high school. No. Unless if you live in a state that's got a lot of regulation, then perhaps. But other than that, no. No. You don't have to box check, okay? But there are a few things that we want to make sure that we get done during the high school years, and we have to spend our entire rest of our homeschool journey preparing for that by keeping what? You guys know, love of learning high and the culture to support love of learning and inspiration for learning all the time consistently. Okay. And if you want that, if that's something that you're like, I don't know how to do that, I don't get it, let's chat. You guys know how to get a hold of me. My information on booking a call with me. It's a free call. I just want to talk with people because everybody's different. I can give you general knowledge here, but we need to chat in order for me to actually understand your situation, your kids, your family, your goals, and lots of things like that, and to put it all into place. Okay. So my booking information is always in the show notes. It's always in the description, and it's always in our Facebook group as well. So you can definitely get a hold of me very, very easily because you guys, this is what I do. This is what the Raising Leaders Roadmap does, is it gets you from where you are to high love of learning and then create that culture to where love of learning stays high. And then you have a lifelong learner and leader who's actually inspired. My son brought in, I don't know how many papers he printed out today of checklists that he wants to do for his education, for things he's involved in, his martial arts, his scouts, his being a son. He wants to improve in those areas. And that's all driven from him. I have not asked him to do that. And he's working towards those things every single day. You guys, those are boxes I'm okay with checking because it's coming from him, right? And it's about getting better and learning more and having a great education. You guys, this is the key to making sure that the lifelong learning is there so that we create leaders. We create lifelong learners and leaders, people that are prepared to do whatever they want to do in the world, and they're successful and confident. And that we're not struggling and frustrated and nagging. No one wants that. You don't have to have that experience. Please don't have that experience. That does not have the outcome of a lifelong learner and leader. Only high level of love of learning and a culture that supports it does. Okay. You guys, I can't wait to talk with you. And next week, we have another great great guest coming up. And please set your calendars for March 13th. We have a very, very new free masterclass that I'm going to be doing, Inspiring Homeschooled Leaders. Free masterclass on March 13th. You guys mark your calendars for that. And I will start the registration soon and let you know when that comes out. I will talk to you guys again next week. Bye-bye.